Hello, it's Cremeore, and today I want to talk to you about love as a goal that someone can have in their life. And by that I mean someone trying to make achieving some sort of romantic relationship a life goal of theirs. I intend to talk about the sort of risk-reward aspect of trying to achieve romantic relationships, the sort of detriments that it could potentially have, and I guess some of the benefits that trying to seek it can bring you. Now, of course, I will only be talking about my own personal experience and my own thoughts about this topic. I'm not sort of any sort of accredited professional or anything like that. So if you want real professional advice for something that applies directly to your situation, please go to see someone who perhaps has been more educated on this than me. Um, I don't think that there will be many things that are very specifically triggering in this video. Please be aware of what things might trigger you specifically, but I think this video is generally safe. One final thing before we get started, this is sort of a very complex topic that I'm willing to talk about and I have a lot of thoughts about, but in this video we're not going to cover every single thing that I think about with it, so please leave a comment to tell me what more you might want me to get into about this. Okay, now, the first thing that I want to talk about is the sort of risk-reward aspect of trying to achieve a romantic relationship. I've known people to make the comparison that love is sort of like a lottery that is nearly strictly based on luck, so we really shouldn't try to put our hopes in achieving a relationship because it's just simply not likely to happen. I want to really examine that notion a little bit more. Since this idea is basically saying that trying to achieve a romantic relationship is just too risky for the amount of effort that you would have to put in, I want to compare it to this sort of risk-reward aspect of participating in the lottery. I think a lot of people can understand why someone would want to win the lottery, or I guess everyone would want to win the lottery, but I want to compare trying to achieve a romantic relationship to that, because then we can sort of analyze the risk-reward aspect of both to try to understand if perhaps achieving love is too risky or maybe it's not. So first I want to talk about the pros and cons of trying to win the lottery. Now, I don't want to talk about this for super long. Talking about the lottery or gambling can be a later video, but there are some pros and cons that I identified that I think are important to think about when we would think about playing the lottery. The pros that I sort of came up with, there's much more than this, but the two main ones are that winning the lottery can very significantly improve your life by just allowing you to have a lot more money, and even not even winning, but just the act of playing the lottery can provide a person hope. So I think that's a really interesting thing. But when we look at the cons, the first one that comes to mind is just the fact that it's extremely unlikely to win. So people aren't very likely to win the lottery ever, like no matter how much you play. The second one is that it does just cost a lot of money. Like if you were to, for example, buy a $1 lottery ticket every week for a year, that would be $52. That could be used on something, I guess. I don't know. Maybe you could buy a video game with it. I don't know. But that is money that you can't spend on anything else. And the final reason that is the most interesting to me is something called the gambler's fallacy. Now, the gambler's fallacy is something that I think we need to keep aware of because it can really skew our decision making. The gambler's fallacy basically says that if you are participating in a sort of luck-based situation, if you lose a bunch, the gambler's fallacy says you're actually likely to start winning eventually. That's not true. All of the attempts that you make at winning something are separate. So if you try to win the lottery one day and then try another day, the fact that you tried 2 days don't connect to each other. So you having lost the first day doesn't make you any more likely to win the second day. So that's a sort of thing that I think is a detriment since people don't fully understand sometimes how this sort of chance works. Now, although I don't think that that's like a fully comprehensive list, I think I covered enough to make this relevant to the discussion. So now I want to talk about the pros and cons of, I guess, trying to seek love. I'll mostly be talking about how they sort of compare to trying to win the lottery and some sort of things that make it different. But let's get into it. Now, since this video is in fact about trying to achieve love, I'm gonna have a lot more say about the I'm gonna have a lot more to say about the pros and cons about trying to achieve a romantic relationship, but there's two pros that I think are sort of interesting to start with, and that is the fact that we think that when we're trying to achieve a romantic relationship, that we're reaching for something that we want. So oftentimes, like, the allure of it is that we're able to find something that we at least think that we want. Similarly, we think that the romantic relationship or something like that will make us feel better or make us have a more pleasurable life. Those are the two main pros, I think, to trying to find a relationship. But I think there are two other ones that, especially when we compare them to winning the lottery, are actually really interesting. The first is that if you're trying to pursue a relationship, one of the things that you will have to do is to try to improve yourself, work on yourself. So if you are trying to pursue a relationship, you're most likely going to improve as a person if you're healthily trying to pursue any sort of relationship, not necessarily a relationship with a specific person, but if you are in general trying to achieve love, you're most likely going to improve yourself as a person. So that's a sort of good thing, I think. And the second thing that is very much comparable to the example with the lottery is that your hard work in terms of trying to pursue a relationship can stack and build together. Now, with the lottery, buying a bunch of separate lottery tickets for different lotteries isn't going to help you actually win the lottery. In this situation, it kind of works the opposite. If you, for example, buy some nice clothes so that you can try to look better, and you perhaps better connect with some of your hobbies, then a lot of these things can actually connect to each other to make you perhaps potential like better potential partner for someone, or just generally make you a better person. So like all the hard work kind of meshes together in a really good way, which is one of the things that I think is really helpful about trying to achieve like romantic relationships. Like oftentimes I think although it can be sometimes unhealthy, often unhealthy, I'd even say, the goal of trying to impress someone helps people along their journeys to really a lot of self-improvement, I think. So that's those are a few pros. But now on to the cons. Now, the first two are going to be similar to the first two from the last time, but they are that you don't really know how seeking love will really change your life. Like, maybe you're the kind of person that prefers to be alone or isn't quite used to trying to put yourself out there. So the sort of stress that you might put yourself through trying to perhaps like find a match on Tinder or anything like that could be sort of something that you're not used to. Similarly, actually getting into a relationship can be much different than a person might think. So if you, for example, seek a relationship for a long time and then you finally achieve it and you think, oh, cool, now I will be happy, it can be really different than you think. Connected to these two, both being in a relationship and achieving one takes a lot of really hard work. And even connected with that one is the fact that you're not guaranteed to succeed. Although I did say that hard work does stack, so you can sort of accumulate the ability to be in a relationship over time, it's not certain. I don't know what the exact numbers on it are, so I don't know if I would say that a person is like under 50% likely to find a good romantic bond with like a life partner in their life, but we certainly can't say it's 100%, and there's no like studies on it or anything, so it's at least got a bit of risk to it. But this last one is where I think it differs very, very significantly from trying to win the lottery, for example. And it is that there are a lot of ways to go about trying to achieve a relationship unhealthily that could even lead you to achieving a relationship, which can just make an even more unhealthy situation. So basically, when I say this, winning the lottery is something that you can very easily understand. Like, you understand what will happen when you win. You'll have more money. Granted, a lot of people who win the lottery do struggle with a lot of personal things in their lives, but they understand what will happen. They will have more money, and they understand what's happening for them to try to get it. They're paying for lottery tickets to try to gain that more money. But in the case of romantic relationships, it can be much more difficult. You, for the journey of trying to find a relationship, may stifle who you are or sort of try to become a different person in pursuit of that relationship. Or maybe when you're even in a relationship, you may sort of diminish who you are, similarly to how you might trying to pursue a partner. So maybe if you like Legos a lot, you, although you think you want a partner who you can play Legos with or whatever, you will perhaps get that partner and then realize, oh shoot, I put myself in a situation where one of the things that I love I won't be able to do anymore. So things like that make trying to make decisions around romantic relationships very difficult. And the reason why I bring this up is because they can lead to a lot of unhealthy things in regards to mental health. So it can breed a lot of harmful things, like, for example, codependency, which I guess is the biggest one, but just other general stressful things like depression and anxiety, which, although can exist with the lottery, it's much less complex, so it's easier to avoid them, I think, with something like the lottery. Eek, my nose was itchy for that take. Now, although I do have more to add on the potential things that you would gain or lose trying to seek a romantic relationship, although I don't think people should generally play the lottery because I think it's kind of too risky, uh, I do think that pursuing romantic relationships is at least sort of worth it. I don't know that you should stake your entire sort of life on it, which I'll talk about later, but I don't think that is something that you shouldn't try to go for at all. This is mostly because of the fact that you can sort of improve at it over time, such that it's not like you're flipping a coin over and over again. So I think it's very helpful that you can sort of do it as a process while you're improving yourself, but it must be done healthily, and that's what mostly the rest of this video will be about. Now, generally, trying to find a partner is a very multifaceted thing. My point is that mostly you have to understand the impacts of the journey of trying to achieve love and the sort of end goal. You have to understand what would happen even if you were to achieve what you think that you want. So that is the first step to really, I think, trying to do this properly and healthily. Now, although I did say that trying to achieve a sort of romantic relationship can be helpful in a lot of ways because it can sort of lead to self-improvement, I do think that constantly looking for a partner is extremely draining. So again, I do not think that this is something that should like overwhelm a person's life and goals. Similarly to how I said that sort of hard work can stack as you sort of try harder and harder to achieve a romantic relationship, I think a lot of the detriments can stack also. So for example, if you try something and then you get rejected, and then you try something again and then you perhaps don't get rejected, but it turns out that it wasn't a healthy experience for you, a lot of that can add together to build to sort of create a sort of unhealthy mindset for you. So maybe you could breed codependency or just have trust issues in general. Maybe you can just struggle with self-esteem because you're not sure if you're worthy of being loved. But I think this is something that you really have to keep in mind on and keep a very tight, close eye on, because if these sort of things happen, then I'd say that trying to achieve love at the moment isn't worth it. Like, you should probably take a break from trying to look for relationships and be single for the moment. But I do think there are some ways to perhaps get around this and still healthily look for a relationship. The first thing that I think is necessary in sort of the decision about how you should be going about trying to achieve a relationship is fully understanding why it is that you want one. Now, for a little personal story, I historically have been, I guess, a hopeless romantic. I haven't always been this way, but I've been this way for a little while, so it's kind of something that's a part of me now. So for me, the way it was that I simply didn't want to live my life alone. I sort of wanted to have a companion just like at some point for the rest of my life. Like, that sounded like the life that I wanted, and I didn't know that I wanted to really do life too much if I didn't have that sort of partner. But even if we'd say that that was sort of healthy, like, where I don't really think it is, but even if we were to say that it was, I have to look deeper and realize that one of the reasons why I did want that is because I sort of struggled to care for myself. So if I just put my energy into caring for another person, and perhaps that person cared for me the same way I cared for them, I wouldn't have to learn to do any self-care or anything like that. So honestly, that was just a very easy breeding ground for a lot of unhealthy habits regarding relationships, which is one of the reasons right now I'm taking a break from them. But yeah, I think that is something that you need to keep in mind. One of the mistakes that I made in this situation that I think other people likely are very likely to make is the fact that I didn't treat love as a want. I treated it as a need. I sort of seek love as something that I needed at some point in my life instead of something that I wanted but should learn to be okay without. This, I think, is the biggest thing that's very difficult to grasp because a lot of people want love for reasons that are absolutely valid and absolutely rooted in who they are and perhaps things that happened when they were very young, but it's difficult to sort of shed that and learn to love yourself. Now, I don't want to be redundant with the old adage of you can't learn to love someone until you learn to love yourself or whatever. But like, I think it's really important to try to think about like why it really is that you want the relationships that you want. If you think that you want like or I shouldn't say want, sorry, that you need a relationship. Like, for example, if you grew up with a family who you didn't feel very loved by, so now you, for example, think that you need to try to seek romantic relationships just to make sure you're validated in the fact that you are a person who's lovable, you, in your mind, likely think that romantic relationships are something that's definitely a need. You definitely need to have a partner for the rest of your life that can reaffirm to you that you are worth loving, but that's unhealthy. I think that you should be able to come to a point where you can go, okay, yes, I am lovable, even if someone happens to not have the hots for you at that moment. This is one of the tough things I think to realize. Sort of connecting with that, I want to sort of say something about how, at least for me, I think we process the idea of achieving a sort of life partner relationship just is in our minds. Now, I'm not a biologist at all. I'm not a scientist, haven't studied this. I really don't know what I'm talking about. But I think that for some reason in our minds, there's sort of intuition that makes us go, I think I can expect reasonably that I'll have some sort of life partner or something in my life. So I'm okay to live in a way that sort of assumed that I will. And I think that's some of the problems that some people might have in their sort of relationships or just in their general life because they sort of put this overemphasis on the relationships that they're not really confirmed to have. Now, again, I'm not a biologist. I really only say this because I think that us as humans sort of understand how a lot of our mating rituals work, and we sort of, since it takes a long time to raise a child, maybe perhaps we associate a partner. I don't know. I really don't know what I'm talking about, but I do think that this is at least semi-legitimate because we really do need to understand that when we are seeking romantic relationships, there's a lot of things that are complicated in those situations. Like, although I'd argue that maybe it was perhaps easier in certain ways to find a lover in early times of humanity, now it's much more complex because our society is just much more complex. Back then, it was just, I don't know, you found someone who also similarly wanted to like eat food and not die, which was probably you, and you had enough things in common probably. But now, since our lives are so integrated into the sort of fields that we're going into or the sort of things that we enjoy, having a partner who just shares your same basic needs of need to eat food to survive and stuff like that isn't enough. So the idea that we can actually reasonably expect a life partner, I think we need to try to relieve ourselves of that. Now, although I've sort of been talking bad about achieving romantic relationships a bit throughout this video, I do think there are some ways to do it kind of healthily. I sort of compare it to trying to be a professional athlete. I think those people often understand that the careers that they're seeking are very difficult to get into, and it's often very unlikely that they will even get them. But they do something called having a fallback career. So maybe someone who is going to college on like a basketball scholarship will ensure that they get out of college with something like an IT degree or something like that, such that if they don't get into the NBA, if they're going in there for basketball, for example, that their life can generally be okay. I think we should learn to do a similar thing with trying to achieve romantic relationships. We should try to secure good friendships. We should try to find good mental health support, and perhaps we should try to find ways to ensure a good amount of sexual intimacy if that's the kind of person we are, so that we can just have some sort of fallbacks just in case we don't fully achieve our dream of love. But to think about love the way that I did, as something that you necessarily will need at some point in your life to make your life be worth it, I think we should try to avail ourselves of that notion. Love is something that's risky and it's hard to get, and even if you do for some reason think that achieving it will solve all your problems, I think that itself is indicative of some problems. So I think we should be really careful with our introspection and really. I'm so sorry. But really try to understand what makes us want what we want so that we can understand either how to get it or if we should go for it. If you're trying to achieve love in this world, I sort of think that you're standing on top of a very tall cliff, seeing nothing but mist below you. If you're running headlong in pursuit of love or a romantic relationship, I think that you're sort of diving off the cliff, uh, diving into water that you hope is there, hoping that there's no obstacles in between you and the water, hoping the water's deep enough, and all while assuming that the water is even directly below you to begin with. This is pretty risky. It's much better to secure yourself and rappel downwards so that when you see what's down there, you can choose how or even if you want to approach it. Thank you so much for listening. This is my this is my highest effort video yet, so I really hope that you enjoyed it. I'm really working on trying to both produce really good content that I really think people might need, and also that will be easily digestible, that people also like want to see. I don't know, it's kind of weird, but I really do hope that you enjoyed it. I want to sort of go back to something that I did in my first video because I'm trying to make this a community, so I want to share something that's like really embarrassing of mine to perhaps try to get any watchers or listeners to also feel that they're open enough to share if they'd like to. But I remember when my mom and I both got Swiss rolls from a family friend, but my mom didn't want her Swiss roll, and I learned that she threw it away. I went through the trash to find the Swiss roll and I didn't even find it. Kind of cringe, probably not the best thing for a person to do, but I did it, and now I'm sharing it with the internet, so I hope this at least makes you feel better about whatever weird thing you do. But I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.